Welcome back to Biggest Little Victory. This is Stephen.
And Pastor Kendra.
And no guests today. So in case you were hoping for a third voice, there's no mime today. The last two guests.
We're going OG.
We're going OG. Back to the original two. Last time we had a couple of guests that were very good at responding exactly the way that we told them. Hi, Mitch. And he goes, hi, Mitch.
Yeah, that man is the perfect. He's a walking plethora of dad jokes.
Yeah, you should definitely check those out on Facebook. They're so funny. Honestly, one of my favorite ones has been there was a post that he had. It said like it was a play on words, I guess. I don't know if that's the correct way to describe it, but it was a ship that was on top of a ship that was on top of another ship that was being towed by another ship. And it was like the caption was like the ship shipping ships that ship ships shipping ships or something like that. It was the most ridiculous thing ever. And I can't it's kind of like the Sally sells seashells kind of thing. Like it's really hard to say it properly.
You almost messed up.
I almost did, but I didn't. I said it.
You got yourself.
I was close. It was very close. Oh, man. So we have been going through Hebrews, and we are expected to be going through Hebrews as a church, and also in this podcast. And it's going to be going through Labor Day, and we are going to just be studying the book of Hebrews, breaking it down kind of chapter by chapter, and hearing from different voices, including Pastor Kendra is going to be having a sermon coming up. Last week we had Emma on the podcast. She will have a sermon. Next week is Pastor Liz. So it's a kind of cool thing about this whole Hebrew series is we're going to get to hear from a lot of different people and get to see a lot of different perspectives and how everyone interprets scripture differently, obviously still correctly, but just through their own personal lens, which is really awesome. I really like to hear that. I'm really excited for all the different voices.
I'm nervous as heck.
You are going to be good.
I get stage fright like no one else. But I plan on practicing and practicing and practicing until I can basically memorize that.
I can come and be a heckler. Just so, worst case scenario, you just have someone who's just in the audience distracting you. So that way, like the day of when everyone's glued, you're like, this is easy.
Right.
I'll be playing music too loudly, texting. It'll be great.
Yeah. Let's not do that.
Yeah. First
I
one.
like you, Stephen. I'd like to keep it that way.
Right. Yeah. First sermon's always the hardest, but once you get that one in the can, then you're just like, okay, that wasn't so bad. And
I don't want it in the can. I want it in the air for everybody to breathe in.
Well, you know what I meant. So we are going to get started. So Kendra, any announcements for us for today?
As always, there are. Give us a like on Facebook at Victory Christian Fellowship. This is where you will find all of our announcements, our service times, our audio links, shout outs, prayers, praises, etc. If you are going to be following us anywhere on social media, that is where to do it. That is where we announce everything and where everything is posted and where we are most active. However, we also do have another Facebook page that I have been neglecting for the past 4 months. Even though it gets posted in every single day, I just never thought to talk about it here. It is called VCF Family. And that is where Liz has been posting her prayer requests. Not on the VCF Facebook.
Not the VCF. It's just, there's Victory Christian Fellowship, which is one page. And then there's VCF Family, which is a different page. Yeah.
Right. So on that VCF Family, that is where we share like funny memes and Jesus puns. And we just have a good time. Good, clean fun. And that is where Pastor Liz posts where she wants prayer requests sent.
So now you know.
So now you know. And also it's just a fun place where we can all get together and say, hey, you know, my son's in a play. Hopefully we can start going to plays again soon. I'm in a choir concert, all that fun stuff. So that's where family announcements are held pretty much. And we do have an Instagram and a YouTube at VCF Reno. That's where we post our sermons every month.
Once per month, you get to 4 hours of sermons.
Okay.
5 if it's a 5-week month. There's 5 Sundays.
Every week, where we post our sermons every week, including with our podcast audio. And And follow us on Twitter at BLV Podcast. And if I don't get any follows on there soon, then I'm deleting it because there are 3 followers. That is me, that is Steven, and that is Pastor Allie. Those are our 3 followers right now. So if you don't follow us, that's fine. I might keep it up to see if we ever, if this does, get off the ground and become a huge thing, which, if not, whatever, we still enjoy doing it.
Right.
Just one less thing to manage. And there are now 3 services every Sunday for the remainder of June. So after June, this might change, but for the remainder of June, we are doing 3 services, one at 8 o'clock, one at 10 o'clock, and one at 12 noon. And if you are already a member of our church, Pastor Rhiannon sent out a letter.
An email,
a virtual
an electronic letter.
She sent out a letter asking you to give you the preference because we do have to keep it in social distancing guidelines. So if you are not a part of that group, please reach out, or on that email list, please reach out to us on Facebook so we can get you an assigned service time, because unfortunately that's what the world's come to. So
it's like an exclusive club. Only a certain amount get in.
Yeah, but all you have to do is ask and you're there.
It's true.
We will also still be streaming all of our services on YouTube, so you can go on at 8 o'clock, you can go on at 10 o'clock, you can go on at noon, and you can watch the live sermons, or you can go on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon that day and go watch it whenever you want. Or if you are within a mile of the church in South Reno, you can turn to 98.5 FM and listen to it there. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Awesome.
Oh, and also, I don't know if we're still doing Zoom meetings. I have no idea what's going on with those. Everything's so up in the air and crazy right now. So if there are Zoom meetings, those are posted on the Facebook. So
the Victory Christian Fellowship page.
Thank you. I just have to remember that there are 2 pages. All right. That's it for announcements, y'all.
Yeah, I don't know if we're still, because I don't even know if the morning meeting is still happening.
I have no idea.
Yeah. Well,
I've been so busy that I haven't been able to get on.
Right. Well, and my sleep schedule's different that I can't even get on it either. So, well, hopefully if it is still happening, then it's still amazing. If not, then it'll be turned into a small group, and we will tell you about those details
once they fall in our lap.
Once they come, yeah. We know as much as what we get told. So.
Yep, pretty much. But to be fair, we don't ask either.
Yeah, that's true. So if you missed the sermon this Sunday, please go check it out. It's called Are We Listening? And it is out of Hebrews. This one's going to be out of Hebrews chapter 2. Now, last week I read the entire chapter of 1, even though he didn't talk on the entire chapter of 1. So this time I'm only going to be reading the verses that he referenced, which is just verses 1 through 8. So we're going to go through those today and just kind of talk a little bit about the sermon and whatever else that we got from the sermon as well as these verses. And if you have a Bible, follow along. Otherwise, sit back and listen, and you'll be back with us in just a second. So we must be more careful to follow what we were taught. Then we will not stray away from the truth. The teaching God spoke through angels was shown to be true, and anyone who did not follow it or obey it received the punishment that was earned. So surely we also will be punished if we ignore this great salvation. The Lord himself first told about this salvation, and those who heard him testified it was true. God also testified to the truth of the message by using wonders, great signs, many kinds of miracles, and by giving people gifts through the Holy Spirit, just as he wanted. God did not choose angels to be the rulers of the new world that was coming, which is what we have been talking about. It is written in the scriptures, "Why are people even important to you? Why do you take care of human beings? You made them a little lower than the angels and crowned them with glory and honor. You put all things under their control." When God put everything under their control, there was nothing left that they did not rule. Still, we did not yet see them ruling over everything. I think I read that last part wrong. Still, we do not yet see them ruling over everything. Interesting. So, going through that part, especially that second part, with the angels versus humans, and I see a lot of times, like when someone passes, they say, heaven needed another angel. And just kind of
I
this.
hate that saying. That saying. Like,
Good, so you know what I'm talking about.
I understand that sometimes that's what people need to hear when they lose a loved one, but that it just every time I hear it, I'm just like, ugh, stop it. Like, you know,
explain your repulsion.
Right. I see. I don't know what it is. It's just like the sound of styrofoam rubbing together. I don't know what it is. I can't even explain why I don't like it. And you know what? And that's just me. That's just me. People who say it, I'm not judging you. Okay? Like, I'm not judging you. I'm sorry that came off so judgmental. But at the same time, you know, we all have our things that we don't like. That's just one thing that I don't like.
That's Kendra's pet peeve. Don't tell her that.
That's not actually my biggest pet peeve is people who dress up their animals.
Ooh. I do not do that. So
thank you.
Then
especially since you have a little dog.
That's
people
true.
with little dogs are prone to dress their animals up.
Oof, no.
But also,
absolutely not.
To each their own. If you do it, then fine.
I mean, the most that I might ever do is give her like those little dog shoes, like when we go hiking, so she doesn't get.
Yeah, but those are kind of cute.
Yeah. I might do that just so she doesn't get like thorns or something if we go hiking in an area that doesn't have a really good trail.
Right, and some people have little dogs that get really cold.
Yeah,
and I get that, but they also go under blankets, so just let them go under blankets.
I have the little dog sweater thing, but it's not like a human sweater.
It's made doggy hot dog bun
kind of thing. Yeah. It's like a blanket.
Okay, anyway,
this is off topic. This is way off topic. But now we know. Don't dress up animals around Kendra. She'll just kind of look at you.
I won't. I whatever. Do you, Booze?
Do what you want. You won't catch her doing it to her dog. That's all she's going to say.
That's all I'm going to say, yep.
Okay, so I sometimes get a little niffled, if that's the right word, at this phrase, because when people say like, oh, heaven needed another angel, I immediately go, that's not how it works. It's just because of like how much I have studied the Bible, and I'm just like, that's not scripturally accurate. Like, we need to stop saying that, especially like the pastor who says that. You know, if a pastor says something, or somebody like in the church says that, it's like, you know better. You know that's not how it works. We don't become angels. Angels are different from humans. And one of the biggest things about that is God did not send his son to die for angels. He sent his son to die for humans. That is the value that he places on us. And that is the value that we want to make sure that we get from him, like from just paying attention to the amount of effort that God has spent trying to get our attention. I mean, again, you look at all of the Bible and look at how God has tried so hard to get attention from humans throughout many, many, many generations. I mean, you had the people who saw his hand in Exodus, in the Exodus story. They left Egypt and they got to see God traveling with them by a pillar of fire at night and a cloud by day, and parting the Red Sea and doing all these miracles, like making water just burst forth out of rocks, giving them food from heaven, and everything else that they could ever ask for. Anything that they needed, God provided. He took care of that. And then immediately, in a few generations later, they were just like, why are we wandering around? Why are we doing this? Is God even real? And they were questioning him again. And then once again, God revealed himself. And they were amazed and came back to him and understood just how much he loves them. And then once again, another few generations later, and people were questioning his existence again. And this pattern just repeats throughout the entire Bible of people just constantly forgetting that God is there, and some of them getting to realize, oh, yes, he is. Now we see it. And then again, their children and grandchildren start to question it. And there was a phrase that somebody said about legends. It said that the stories, what is it? It's like the stories become, oh man, I'm going to mess this up. The stories become like legend. The legends become myths. And then the myths just become fairy. I don't know. There's a step I'm missing in there. But basically the whole idea is like the stories that get passed down, the further along they get passed down, the less likely that generation is to believe that they even happened, that they even took place. And pretty soon we just start doubting everything.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So it's like you think about all the stories of the past and these historical figures, like even outside the Bible. Let's take Alexander the Great, for instance. You know, everything that he did, or everything that Genghis Khan did and said, did they actually say and do those things? Or have they just become stories? Have they just become myths that we just no longer really believe in them. They're just cool stories to pass around, but nothing else.
I don't know. Some stories are pretty, like, they come from age-old text.
Right.
You know, so some stories are, you know, like Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan.
Right.
A lot of things, a lot of those things while they were happening were being documented kind of like the Bible.
Right.
So when they're being documented and then you read them and then you realize this was written as it was happening, then it adds a little bit more credence to it.
Definitely. But it just makes me wonder about how we have responded to the Bible now, because even though miracles are still happening all around us, my life itself has been full of miracles, just from my birth to incidents that have happened in my life that should not have happened the way that they did. And I know people can say, like, well, there's a scientific explanation for that. And maybe there is, because I don't ever want to say that the Bible, it's the Bible versus science or God versus science. I say it's science because of God. So there might be a scientific explanation, but that doesn't mean that it's any less of a miracle, any less of God's hand in my life. And so when I think about with these biblical stories, especially when you get into the Old Testament, that people don't want to believe that kind of stuff anymore. And I think it's because we're so far removed from it now that we don't have the same wonder that the people who experienced it firsthand had. And so going back to the whole angels versus humans thing, is that we like to think of angels as being better than humans, is that angels are some kind of being or creature that is, we used to be human and now gets to come back and watch over you, right? That your grandmother, your mother who passed on, is now an angel and she's watching over you. She's protecting you. And that sounds nice and it sounds cute, but the truth of that is that, one, she's not an angel. If she is in heaven, we don't know what. This is where it gets murky, because heaven, the theology of heaven is debatable. There's a lot of different stories that we have of people who say they've gone to heaven and come back. There's the different descriptions of heaven when you look through just how Revelation describes heaven, how Ezekiel describes heaven, how, you know, all these different stories about what paradise is and what the roles are of people, and how much do people in heaven know what's going on back here on earth. That's a whole different theology. It's a whole different discussion that we could get into. I mean, we could have several podcast episodes. We could have a whole different show dedicated to the theology of heaven.
Which we might. Stay tuned.
You never know. But the whole idea is just that we aren't angels, and that's actually a good thing, because, again, we were fought for. God fights for our attention. The angels are already there. When you read the description of heaven, and I'm sorry, I'm going on like a really long rant with this, but
fine. I'll butt in when I need to.
But there's a description of the angels in heaven that they're just sitting around the throne room and they're just constantly saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty." And that's all they're doing 24/7. They're just around the throne, just declaring just how holy God is. That's it. And that's the other person, Isaiah. That's who else I was going to say had a vision of heaven. So it's everyone has this different vision of heaven. But anyway, so you have these angels who are just around the throne. They know how holy God is. They know how, I don't even know how else to describe it. He's, you know, indescribable, but just how perfect and perfectly holy that he is. And that's all they're doing is day and night. They're just praising him. Whereas we are down here on earth, and despite the fact that they are already up there praising him, God is willing to send his son down to fight for us, to fight for our souls, to fight for our will, because the angel's already with him. He doesn't have to fight for them. They're already there. They're already in his presence. They can't help themselves but worship him and how holy he is. We're the ones who can choose. We're the ones who can tell God no. And some angels did tell God no, and they followed Satan, and that became their whole separate thing. But for the most part, humans are the only aspect of creation that can say no to God. Everything else has to obey. God speaks and light comes into being. God says, do this, and whatever he's talking to does it without hesitation. When Jesus told the storm to be quiet, instantly the waves and the wind were still. Just immediate obedience. We are the only aspect of creation, aside from those angels who walked away with Lucifer, that can say no. When God says, please go and talk to that person. Please just give that homeless guy $2. You know you have the $2 in your wallet right now. Just give it to him. we're the ones who can say, no, I'm not going to do that. Jonah tried to say no, and he ran away from God as far as he possibly could, and God followed him and basically almost forced him back, but still Jonah could have still said no, but God got his attention, and eventually he said yes. But the whole idea is that we actually have this ability to say no and not just be immediately be destroyed by a holy God that demands obedience, which is huge. And that, to me, that just talks about the love that God has for us, because if he was all wrath and justice, the second that we said no, we should just be immediately like smited, because he's like, well,
like, cool.
Yeah. It's like, I told you something to do and now you're not going to do it. So goodbye. Like, clearly you were a mistake. But instead he lets us say no, and he lets us make our own decision. And I think that just places such a huge value on who we are as people, and that we should be happy that we don't become angels. We should be happy that we're humans that are fought for.
That's it. Bye, everybody.
Sorry, I went on a whole tirade, but as I was just reading this, like even just now, I was just reading this, I was like, that is so cool.
Well, it kind of reminded me of something that Pastor David said a couple weeks ago. He said, you know, what's the main thing that people, like non-Christians, want to argue about when it comes to the Bible? Dinosaurs.
It's true.
It is 100% dinosaurs, because I used to be that non-Christian. I used to be like, well, explain the dinosaurs, and my dad would get into it, and I'd be like, nah.
Nah.
That's not how it is. And he said, just because it's not in the Bible doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that really struck me, and it sat with me for a couple weeks, so much that I wasn't even ready to really talk about it. Now I kind of am. And we might have to reevaluate or reconnect with this issue with a guest, because I would like to maybe talk to them about it. But just because it's in the Bible doesn't mean it's not there. What else isn't in the Bible? iPhones. You know, like but iPhones are happening.
Modern technology,
right?
Yeah.
And one day those iPhones are going to be so archaic, people are going to be like, no, those didn't exist. Like, you know, that's not what happened. My phone is downloaded into my brain, so I can't even imagine that we used to have to hold them.
Yeah. Well, there was this old 1980s Pepsi commercial, and it was like, the commercial was based like some distant time in the future. And I think they found like a baseball like buried in the dirt, and they're like, I wonder what they use this for.
Oh my gosh.
If
baseball dies with the future, I'm coming back from my position as an angel. No, I'm just kidding. I'm coming back and I'm haunting the entire world. Do not let baseball die, okay? I'm already going a year without baseball, and I am sad.
It was either like there was a baseball in the commercial. I'd have to look it up again, but there was like a baseball in the commercial, or there was a guitar. It was one of those two things. But it was some normal everyday object, and this futuristic. It was a class that was on a tour. They were on this like field trip, kind of like an excavation class, and they just like uncovered this thing that to us would just be normal. And they're like, I wonder what they use this for. So weird, you know? It's like, so that just immediately reminds me of that, like them finding like an iPhone in the dirt and being like, what in the world?
Right.
Yeah, this is a really weird brick.
Right. But I mean, that's just something to think about, is that when you're having that argument as a Christian, if somebody says, well, what about the dinosaurs?
Yeah.
What about the dinosaurs? We're not saying that the dinosaurs didn't exist. And we're not saying that science doesn't exist either.
Right.
We as Christians are saying that all those things happened because of God. Just because they weren't in the freaking Bible doesn't mean that they didn't happen. Are us specifically, like Stephen Twyford, your name is not in the Bible.
Oh, shucks.
Unless you wrote it there.
There's a version.
This Bible belongs to.
There's a version of my first name that's in the Bible, but
that's cool.
I debate its pronunciation multiple times.
Yeah, well, my name was the same name as Dumbledore's mom. So that's how relevant that is to that. But it just, I don't know. I totally 100% agree with your stance on the haven't needed another angel. Like,
Yeah.
I 100% agree with you on that. And I'm happy that you were able to explain why I didn't like it, because for some reason I was thinking that it was because we don't die and become angels. It's not how it works. And it's kind of like that movie that we watched last weekend where they died and went up and became angels. I won't say which movie it is because it's not a Christian movie.
Right.
But they all died and they went up to heaven and they got halos.
Just like that. Yep. Everyone gets a halo.
And it's fun to think that, and none of us really know. And the people who say that they do know, who are we to say that they're wrong?
And I think the hardest part is, so there's two sides to this too. I think the hardest part on one end is it's something that we want to believe because we want to believe that when people go to heaven that something good like that happens, that you were so good you became an angel or something like that, that almost like a saint, that. And I get like the desire to want to say that, especially at a funeral. You want to say nice things. There was something that an author said once. He said that I can pretty much guarantee your funeral will be nice. People are going to say nice things about you. They're going to come up with things that you did, things that they liked, why they liked you as a friend. Like, it's very rare that you're going to have a funeral where people show up and go, "Yep, glad he's gone." It's very unlikely that's going to happen. Those people, even if they attend, are going to keep their mouths shut. Because
if they're at your wedding, or not wedding. Why? Where is my brain today?
If they're at your wedding, why did you invite them?
They should say nice things at your wedding too. Like, if they're not saying nice things at your wedding, you shouldn't have invited them. Or if you didn't invite them, you should kick them out.
Right.
But dang it! If people are coming to your funeral just to bash you, they have way too much time on their hands.
Yeah. That reveals more about their character,
right,
than anything else.
Right. And then hopefully a family member tackles you to the ground and you get thrown out by your shirt collar.
Right. So there's already this precedent that a funeral is going to be nice. They're only going to say nice things about you. They're not going to talk about all the times you lied or, betrayed someone's trust or anything like that. But the thing is that sometimes it gets overdone. You can say nice things about somebody, but when you start to go to the drastic lengths of like, oh yeah, they're definitely in heaven and they're an angel and all this kind of stuff, that's where it gets kind of murky territory, because now you're just assuming things because it sounds nice to make the grieving family feel better. And at some point there still needs to be an accountability to scriptural truth. And I think that's a really difficult thing to have at a funeral, because most people are saying, oh, just be quiet. Just let him talk. Just let him do his thing. But I think demystifying death is important in the Christian community. And that's where I get to the other side of it, is because sometimes we're also very quick to just say, oh, that person's in hell, or that person's in heaven.
Or she's looking up at me now.
Yeah, or down or whatever. Yeah. And so looking up at me. But, ultimately, we are not the judges. God is. So even if you say like, well, that person just lived a life of sin. Okay. That's still between them and God. That's not between you and that person. You're not the one who sends them to hell or to heaven. So for us to just assume where anyone is a very dangerous precedent to set, to just decide, oh, I know where that person is. I know exactly where they are. And it's like, do you? Are you sure? Are you God? Do you know for a fact where they ended up? Because be careful. Be very, very careful with that. So I think there was also this pastor that back in the 30s, he talked about a cemetery, and he said something that was, at the time, to the people, he was driving by it, and his wife and his friend and his friend's wife were all in the car. And as they're driving by the cemetery, he just looks down and goes, huh, nice straight plantings. Just, says this like really almost insensitive comment about a cemetery, like, oh, it looks pretty. And they were just like, that's a cemetery. Like, there's some respect there. But
cemeteries are supposed to be pretty.
Right.
He didn't say anything bad, y'all. Like, they're supposed to be pretty. You wouldn't want to bury your loved one in some rundown pit. No, they're supposed to be pretty.
Right. No, so
I think cemeteries are peaceful, and
yeah.
I've never been at a cemetery that made me uneasy, but I usually go in the daylight.
That's
like a smart person.
You don't walk around in the midnight, the witching hour.
Yeah, I'm not one of those.
Yeah, so
used to be, not anymore though. Now I'm like, oh, it's dark outside. I can't see 10 feet in front of me. Nope.
No, thank you. I've seen the movies. I know what happens. Yeah, so he just made this comment, but then he defended it by saying, the people aren't there. Those are just bodies. The people that were in those bodies are no longer there. The souls are no longer there. So to have this idea that we're talking to a body and that person can hear you is unscriptural. And that was his stance. Now you can debate that and go back and forth on it, but that was his stance, was that it was unscriptural. That you're talking to a rotting corpse. You're not talking to a person. That person is gone.
Don't say rotting corpse.
I know. I'm sorry.
like,
I'm
dang,
sorry.
man.
I know it's harsh. It really is. But it's this whole like demystifying death, and this took a whole different turn than I wanted it to.
I know. We're not even talking about.
We're not even talking about it anymore. We're just constantly going off on rabbit
on a roll with
trails.
some other topic, but that's okay. That's what
okay.
you guys are here for.
But it's
somewhat structured chaos.
Right. So yeah, just demystifying that death, I think, is sometimes important. It is important in the Christian community, because we shouldn't fear death. Like, I get death is scary, and the idea of dying is scary, and the idea of leaving behind people is scary. But at the same time, if we really do have our eyes on the prize, which is, I mean, just even from this passage, how much God is trying to get our attention, are we listening? And he's trying to get our attention. At the same time, death should be almost something that we not necessarily embrace.
It's like what they say in Harry Potter.
What's that?
Where he takes off the invisibility, one of the three brothers. He takes off the invisibility cloak, hands it off to his son, and takes off with death as if they've been old friends.
Yeah. No, that's good. Yeah.
Sorry, bringing some mystic to it.
No, that's all right. And there was even a Robin Williams quote from the movie Hook, where he said, "Death is the next greatest adventure."
Yep. That's so funny, because Pastor Lewis and I had a conversation about death today.
Oh, really?
In my office. Like, Pastor Lewis just came by and we were just talking about death. And really, quite frankly, it's because we're surrounded by so much of it right now, or at least the impending doom of it right now. There are three members of our congregation who are just, one is fighting for his life and winning valiantly, but what he has is scary enough to where, we have to be prepared for it.
Right.
And then two others are any day now type. So right now, like, as pastors, we have to be there as support, and worst comes to worst, last rites, all that jazz. And I was in the room when, just this January, when my great grandmother passed, and it was an experience. But it didn't affect me in a negative way. If anything, it helped my outlook on death, because just a few doors down from where my grandmother died, on the same floor, in the same unit, in 2015, my uncle died. And that was the first time I had ever been in the same room as a dead person.
Yeah.
And it was somebody that I was extremely close with, and he lost his battle with cancer. And so there was that. And then just this past January, I was in the room when my grandmother passed. And so I was having this conversation with Lewis about it. And I was just talking, and I was like, death doesn't bother me as much as it used to. And it's not that bother is a bad word when it comes to that. But it's,
I know what you mean.
Like, I'm not scared of it anymore. You know what I mean? Because even though I've seen two very extremely close loved ones pass, it was peaceful. And I know that some people die tragically and violently, no matter how it comes. And that's not fun. That's not fun at all.
No.
And if that ever happened to someone close to me, I might have a different reaction to how I reacted to these deaths. But I'm not scared of death anymore, because I know where my soul's going. I know I'm good. Yeah, I've sinned, but I know who my Father is, and I know who's going to be waiting for me. And Pastor David says it practically every week. I know that God's going to say, "Welcome, faithful servant, well done." And not, "Away from me, I never knew you." Because if I got up to heaven and Jesus was like, away from me, I never knew you, I would be like, okay, can I have a do-over? Because I tried really hard.
Please. Yeah. Oh, that would be the worst.
Oh my God.
Worst thing to ever hear.
Because we're not all perfect. No one's perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect human being. There's people who seem to be good at whatever they try. There's people who seem to have more smarts than anybody that I know and are incredibly good looking with flawless skin, but they have their faults, whether it's in their personality or whatever. You know, nobody's perfect. So if that were the case, heaven would be empty. Heaven would be empty if there was a perfect person and only perfect people were allowed up there.
Yeah, that's true. It would just be Jesus.
And he'd be like, cool, y'all.
He's the only human who's lived perfectly. So it'd just be him.
Right. Yeah.
There was a professor that said, if heaven was everything that you could ever imagine, it was even more than you could ever imagine. Everything was perfect. Everything was great. Everything that you wanted was there. Everyone that you wanted to be with was there. Everything that you wanted to have, you could have it. Anything that you could imagine would just come true. But God was not there. Would you still be okay with it? And he would ask this question to just anyone. And sometimes people were just like, no, I wouldn't. And other people were just kind of silent. Because the way that he described it was everything that they could ever want. It was everything they could ever dream of. But God wouldn't be there. Would you be okay? And some of them were just like, yes. They just kind of answered it. And he said, well, then that kind of tells what your soul is prepared for. And it was just kind of this scary dialogue, but it was just this idea of heaven is about God.
Yeah, hi, have you been slapped in the face today? Okay, well, I'm going to do it for you.
Right. Heaven is about God. So if you're going to heaven for any other reason except because you want to be with God, it's not the right reason. Your heart is focused on the wrong thing. If you're focused on, well, there better be, okay, so I'm just going to say this. There's been some really ridiculous things like, oh, there better be Starbucks in heaven, or, oh, there better be In-N-Out in heaven. I've heard this. Kendra's giving me this look right now, but I've heard this. People have said that, like, if there's not an In-N-Out in heaven, then I don't want to go there. And I'm like, really? That's really the deal breaker for you?
You eat enough In-N-Out, you'll get to heaven. Pretty quick.
Don't drop the mic. It's too expensive.
Gosh. But In-N-Out is really good.
So I've heard these things, but anyway, like, even out of the stuff that you really, really, really want heaven to be and who you want to be there, even if they're not, like, what if you took all of that away and it was just God? Could you be okay with that? Taking away everything else that you want heaven to be. And it kind of helps. It's a question that helps kind of clarify where your heart is and just how much you're focused on this world and on material things, or if you actually are focused on the prize. Because the prize isn't just gold, like streets of gold and all the money and a giant mansion and whatever else you think heaven is, but the prize is God. The prize is eternal union with God, the Holy Trinity. That's what Christianity is about. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to understand. Like, I don't get that. They're like, how can I?
Right. So when you get up there, it's not just God.
Focus.
You
right.
got God. You got his son.
Yeah.
And you got the Holy Spirit. You got yourself a good little powwow over a campfire.
It's right. And the stories they could tell.
I bet they are really great gossips. They're just like, yo, did you hear what happened down there yesterday?
So I don't know. So yeah, no, I get that. The whole idea of like not fearing death. Yeah, the person that I was in the room with who died was my mother after her 18-year battle with cancer. Pretty much my entire life she had cancer, and that's all I knew was that she had chemotherapy every Tuesday was just her appointment time. And by the end, her immune system was so shot that it was actually double pneumonia that did her in. To say it crassly, but it was like ultimately because of the chemotherapy that had destroyed her immune system that she got double pneumonia, and it came out of nowhere. But just being in that room with her, my brother's crying, my sister's crying, and my brother never cries. If you know my brother, he never cries. But all my family is just tearing up. And I actually found myself just being like, thank God. Not because I was like, oh, good riddance. Absolutely not. It was because
she's not hurting anymore.
She's not hurting. She's finally free. And that was the big thing. I was like, for 18 years, she couldn't be out in the sun because all the hormones, the chemotherapy messed with her hormones so badly that being out in the sun caused intense headaches. So she couldn't ever go out on a sunny day, which in Reno is like 300 days a year. So that just meant so much of the year she had to spend inside. And if she did go out, it was for very brief periods. She had to wear a sun hat and sunglasses and all this stuff. And even then, it was only for like maybe 30 minutes at a time. And then she had to go back inside. So she would look forward to cloudy days. But yeah, I was just so happy because I was like, she's finally free. She gets to be in the light of God and no headaches, no more pain, no more chemotherapy, none of that. It's gone. And that to me was one of my first glimpses of what it means to be in the presence of God, is that everything that was sucky about this world is just gone. And it's such a pure, pure focus. And that's what I look forward to so much, is that pure focus on God, because so much of what I do here, I get distracted by. I get distracted by when I'm depressed and all my depressed thoughts. I get distracted by how awful this world is sometimes. Before we started, Kendra and I were just talking about and lamenting about how sad our world is right now and how it just continues to be sad. And all that stuff just distracts and keeps you from focusing on God. And when you get the chance to, the idea that I get to be in his presence and not have to be distracted by all of the garbage that is going on here on earth, what a gift. There's no better gift than that. So
I don't know. There's a little fault in that.
Okay.
Because you have to think, like, I would like to think that if I drop dead right now, please don't. Please don't do that yet.
Yeah, Dustin won't like me.
Right. You would probably get hardcore questioned if I were to just drop dead right now.
Probably be right behind you.
Right, considering that you're the only person here right now, my husband would be like,
I'm pretty sure
what happened, bud?
It wouldn't be long for this world after that.
Anyway, I have a feeling that I would be up there kind of worrying about the people that I left down here with how scary the world is right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, but at the same time,
I don't know if you, yeah.
At the same time, maybe you just forget about it.
I don't know if it's so much forgetting, but it's kind of like when something happens that is so amazing or so attention grabbing that you just kind of forget everything else you were doing. You know, like if you get in one of those moments where you're just like, you're so absorbed in like what's going on. You're like, oh yeah, I was totally doing something else.
Right. You're like, all right, I'm dead.
Yeah, right. I think that's what it's going to be like being in God's presence, that you're so wrapped up in the idea of just being in his presence that every other thought that you had is just out the window. And you've just,
right. And you also might take some solace that your family members will join you when it's their time.
Sure. And I can't say
however it works. I'm not sure.
Right. And I can't say.
Nobody knows.
Right.
We don't know if we get our own personal heavens. We don't know if we can have heavens with everybody else in the world, which hope not.
Gotta share the mansion.
Right. Not the mansion. I'm cool with like a studio.
I don't really want a mansion either. That stresses me out.
I don't like cleaning. But, you know, who knows?
Who knows?
Maybe one day we'll know. And that's not at all what this sermon was about.
Not even slightly.
The main question is are we listening? That was the main question. So, Stephen, before we wrap things up on this we might as well just touch on it a little bit.
Sure.
Are you listening?
I think that there are some times I'm not. There are definitely times when I am distracted, not listening to God. And I know that very clearly by my mood and just what I think during the day. I can tell, like, oh, I have not been listening at all to this and to him. And I've just been listening to voices that are of the world and not of God. So I can't say that for 100% that I have been listening. No. And it's been very revealing.
I think it's kind of like a radio where if you drive out of range, sometimes you lose signal.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to do that. It's very easy to get out of range to where you're like, zero back and get back to God, especially with how crazy the world is and how self-absorbed we can be, but righteously so. I mean, we can't just be like, okay, God, it's in your hands, and then do nothing. That's not how it works, So it's hard. It's hard, and if anybody says that they're listening 24/7, they're not.
Right.
They're not. I mean, there are times where you don't even think about God. There are times where I don't think about God.
Yeah.
Most of the day, I don't think about God. I talk to God 3 times a day. When I wake up in the morning, when I have my lunch, and when I go to bed. But in between, yeah, sometimes I'm not thinking about God. Sometimes I'm not listening to him. Sometimes he's telling me like, hello. He's knocking me on the top of my head and being like, hey, dummy, listen to me.
Right.
Grabbing me by my cheeks and just being like, listen to me right now. And I'm just like looking off into la la land. So I think the main point is to start being more in tune for when you are listening.
Yes.
Because even if you are listening, that doesn't mean you're absorbing. And I was just telling Stephen this, I'm guilty of it. And even when it's just when Pastor David's up there preaching, I listened to his sermon twice this weekend and I absorbed very little. And it wasn't because I wasn't listening. It was because I wasn't taking notes like a smart podcaster.
Well, this smart podcaster forgot his notes.
Gosh, we really prepare when we have a guest coming on, but when it's just the two of us, like, we got this, and then we go completely off topic. But at least we're still talking about Jesus.
Yep, we always bring it back.
Yeah.
So I'm going to title this one different title because we talked about death and heaven a lot.
Are we listening? Because we weren't.
Yeah.
Are you listening? Because we weren't.
Whole different topic, but it's okay. Some of you might find it very interesting.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, so next week we are excited. We're going to have Pastor Liz on the podcast.
Whoop whoop! She's giving the sermon.
She's giving the sermon.
Really excited to come on. She approached me after the service on Friday. She's like, Kendra, I'm ready to put myself out there. I'm like, okay, Liz, let's do it. Yes, do it. Especially on a week that she's preaching. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
She's a wonderful human being and a wonderful pastor and a very, very faithful, God-loving woman. She is incredible. I can't wait for you guys to hear what she has to say about what she has to say.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. And I think she's the second to last pastor that we haven't had on the podcast because it's just Tiffany after that.
Right.
Yep.
Nope. She's the second to last pastor, and Tiffany hopefully will be able to come on within the next 2 months. So,
yep.
But yeah, she's the second to last. Yeah, we've had Rhiannon, Doug, Leslie, Lewis, David. We need to have Pastor David back on.
It's true.
Because poor Pastor David was our guest guinea pig. And
that's true. Oh, man, poor guy.
That dude
was not ready.
He was probably like, I'm letting these people do a podcast for my church while he's eye-twitching and considering.
Yeah. We were passing the mic around on that one.
Yeah, that was a rough start. But to be fair, that was right before quarantine. And we were just getting the hang of it. And so he was our first guest. So we should definitely have him back on. Maybe the week after Liz. We'll see. I'll ask him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that'll be a good discussion. And we really need to make sure we send him good questions.
Yes.
So we need to spend very heavy attention. Like Sunday night. Send it to him.
Absolutely.
Anyway. We'll have that discussion in private later when you guys aren't listening to us thinking, okay, can you shut up now?
In this podcast already.
Right. I know people are like, wow, these people are really going off.
Any final announcements or words of wisdom for our listeners?
Nope, no more announcements. Just remember that we are switching to 3 services and to ensure that you are coming to the right one so we can keep it under social distancing guidelines.
Perfect.
And continue to wash your hands. Continue to be safe. I know that you guys want to go out and spread the word for everything that's going on right now, but the virus didn't just go away.
Right.
That's all I have to say.
It's still a danger.
Still a danger. Please continue to wear your masks, wash your hands, practice safe social distancing, and please continue to fight for what you feel is right. I'm not telling you not to do that. Just please remember that that virus is still around.
Absolutely.
Yep. And that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Well, we will see you all next week.
Alrighty. Prayers and love, everybody.